Welcome to Phase 2. Phase 1 is still going incredibly well. I have had an unbelievable number of submissions of ships. I was expecting maybe 20. We're sitting right now at around 150 ships split between 5 categories, which is a lot of ships. I'm going to have to work out some way that we can go through these to do the voting, but that doesn't matter. Just keep submitting ships. I'm loving it. There's some really cool designs out there. I'm doing my best not to get spoiled at them, so when I do a video showing them off, you'll get my first reactions when I see them. There's a few new rules for Phase 2, but I think a lot of people are going to be really excited for Phase 2 because this is where we start looking at the strike group ships, which I think are, well, I know are a lot bigger, and I think a lot of people are more excited to build around than the smaller garrison ships. Before we get there though, there's a couple of quick rules updates. The deadline for Phase 2 is also the 7th of August 2022, so that does give you a bit less time to work on it, but you do still have the weekend to do so. I want to get things moving, so I'm keeping things quite tight. I'm sorry if that's a bit tight for you, but we'll keep going with it. Again, all of these ships must have landing gear. They must be capable of landing and supporting themselves on their landing gear. This is because you can surprise attack them in garrisons sometimes, and if they're landed and repairing and they can't support themselves on the ground, they will collapse into themselves and explode, and that's no fun for anybody, so they do need to be able to control themselves. I am keeping the 60% escape pod rule, and I will be holding to that as well when I build my ships for the campaign, don't worry. Again, submissions through the Google form. There's a different one for Phase 2. I'll put the link to it in the description of this video so you can get access to that. Don't submit any ships for this through the link for Phase 1. Make sure you're using the Phase 2 link, which is in the description for this video. One new rule is that I'm enforcing a naming convention for ships. What I'm going to have to do is go through every ship that was submitted in Phase 1 and rename it just so that it makes sense for me when I'm actually going through it and recording it in video and looking at it in game. So I really need you to follow the naming convention. It's on screen there. Put the original ship's name, then an underscore, then your username, then an underscore, and then the new ship name. So for example, if I was putting in a new Archangel, for example, I would put Archangel underscore Fros underscore Rooster Mark 4. That's it just there. I've got my blue cursor. Should be showing up in a second. It's not, that doesn't matter. So I think I can do it from here actually. Yeah, Archangel, Fros, Rooster Mark 4. That's how I want the naming convention to show up. After a lot of feedback from Phase 1, I'm giving you a little bit of wiggle room in terms of ship costs. You no longer need to exactly match or have a maximum of how much the original ship cost. You now have a 5% wiggle room. So you can go over or under the ship cost of the original ship by 5%. So you can go a little bit over. If it turns out you're just going to buy like 70 credits or something that's no longer a hard limit, you can do that, which I think should give you a little bit more of flexibility in what you're designing. But two important rules, because these ships need to roam the map and the AI will try and use them in certain ways thinking that they are other ships. Your ship can't have less range than the previous one, and you can't have a slower map traveling speed than 90 kilometers per hour. That's the speed of the Nomad, and that can be attached to Strike Fleet. So just make sure your ships are not slower than 90 kilometers per hour, and they can travel as far as the ship that you are replacing, so that when you actually get them into the game, they respond properly and they can travel as far as they're supposed to and end up crashing in the desert or something, because I'm not sure how their AI will be able to deal with ships that can't do that. Be that as it may, those are your rules. They're not that strict, they're not that strong. Just make sure, please, to use the naming convention, because if I get a lot of people submitting ships without hitting that naming convention, I won't be able to rename them in time, and I'm gonna have to leave them by the side. So please make sure you're following the naming convention when you're submitting your ships. Don't worry if your ships didn't do that for Phase 1, that's my fault, I'll fix that. But going forward from Phase 2, please make sure you're following this naming convention. Okay, let's look at the ships we're replacing in Phase 2. The first one is the Bore. Now, one thing I want you to bear in mind when we're looking at these ships is some of them have sensors on them. It might be a very good idea for your version of these ships to replicate the sensors, or at least have some sensor functionality, so that when the AI is using them to pilot strike fleets, it can actually detect my fleets and find me. The Bore is a big, fat, slow ship. It mounts some very big guns, but doesn't have the best configuration because it has that huge fuel tank in the center. It has a radar, it has ELINT. I don't think it has any IRST. No, it doesn't. And it's just a big, slow ship that cruises around the map. The cost that you've got to work off here is 69,110 credits. Remember, you've got that 5% buffer, plus or minus, to work on. And you need to make sure that your ship has a minimum range of 2,405 kilometers. So make sure you hit that. But this is a big strike fleet ship. This should be punishing. This should be scary. I definitely think there's going to be two main camps in terms of ships that are going to get built here. We're either going to have slow monstrosities that are just covered in armor, and other people are going to build fast strike groups that are going to try and hunt me down before I can escape them. And they're going to be very fast and very, very mean, but maybe die very quickly. But that is the Bore. The next ship that we're looking at replacing is the KORMORAN. You should recognize these ships. They're ships that come up all the time in Highfleet. This one has IRST and it looks like an FCS because it has sprints. So you may want to make sure your ships have anti-air capabilities on them so I can't destroy them with planes. This only has 4 sprints. That's not very many. Maybe you want to cover it with more anti-air. Maybe I'm not going to use anti-air. You don't know. Your cost for this one is 60,720 credits, and you need a minimum range of this one is 2,638 kilometers. So it's a little bit more forgiving on range. The price is very similar. You'll find the price of most of these is very, very close together. It's almost like when Constantine was putting this game together, he just gave himself a target price, and that's what he went to for all these ships. But see what you can come up with something better than the KORMORAN. The KORMORAN is very common. It comes up in most strike groups, so this ship will be maybe not the most powerful ship in the strike group, but it will be displayed a lot. You'll see it a lot in game, which hopefully means we'll get some cool submissions for this one. Just looking back at phase 1, if people are interested in it, at the moment, the ships that we're seeing the most of in terms of getting submitted are Courageouses and Gladiators, with quite a few Sloggers as well. People want to try and take their own version of the Slugger on, but Courageous and Gladiator is the most popular compared to the others, which I think is really, really cool. I'm really excited to see all the different Courageouses. Next ship we're replacing here is the NEGEV, another ship that shows up all the time in strike fleets. Very similar to the KORMORAN, it has more sensors on it. This one has FCS, radar, and ELINT. It also has zeniths and sprints. It's actually incredibly slow, this ship. If you look, it only has 2 RD-59 engines on it. Maybe that's the reason strike groups are so slow, is they're dragging around NEGEVs with them. Cost for this one is 64,920. That's a lot of money, and its minimum range is 3,146. So there's your difficulty. This is a very expensive ship that needs to be able to go very far. Can you beat that? Let's see what you come up with. So remember, 64920, and you have that 5% buffer either side. Next up, we have a sort of ship that shows up in garrison sometimes, also shows up as an escort for strike fleets, the NIMROD. The NIMROD does show up quite a lot, but I tend to destroy it with bombers. But it is a very heavily armed and armored ship. It's not particularly fast. It has that double-barreled 180mm gun mounted in it and no anti-air capabilities at all. So if it gets attacked by planes, it does tend to die very, very quickly. It does have 2 zeniths in there. I'm sure you can come up with a much better version of the NIMROD than this. The cost to play with there is 22,260, so it's quite cheap, and a range of 972 kilometers. So I think there's a lot of wiggle room there. It might not look like much right now, but I think this ship has a lot of capability for you to be very adventurous with your designs. Come up with something different, come up with something cool. I'm excited to see what you do with the NIMROD. Now there's one ship that does show up both in garrisons and in strike fleets that we haven't covered yet, and I'm sure you're very excited to see it. It is, of course, the Archangel. This is definitely a ship I think people are going to be very excited to rebuild. And you'll find that the requirements for it are actually quite relaxed. You have 62,600 credits to play with, that's a lot of money, and you only need to make it travel 835 kilometers, which isn't very much. So I think you could do wonders with this ship. One of the reasons this ship is doesn't have a lot of distance to it is because it only mounts, doesn't mount any cruiser engines. It only has frigate engines. I can't remember the name of it off my head, but you can see them on the picture. It doesn't have any of the big RD-59s or anything like that. So there's no D-30s here either. There's actually 2 D-30s. I can see them just tucked under the wings. It is a very slow, very heavily armored, very scary ship, and I'm sure you could make it much scarier. Remember, there's nothing wrong with making it much faster than it is at the moment or making its range much, much higher. Just don't go below that 835 kilometer range. Now to keep things simple, because these are very large ships, I have just gone for 5 ships in phase 2. We've got the Archangel, the Bori, the KORMORAN, the NEGEV, and the NIMROD. Ignore the range on these slides, just go with the cost because I think the ranges don't quite tie up. Just the game recalculates things slightly when you put it into the shipbuilder. But this is what we're looking at. You've got your costs there, you've got the names of the ships, and remember, you need to use the link in the description for phase 2. Don't submit these ships to phase 1. We've had a ton of people jump on the Discord after the first video. There's been tons of conversations about ship designs. People are posting pictures of their ships and spoilers, so I can't see them, which is very frustrating, but I love it. Just want to say special thanks to everyone on Discord who's helping me out with setting this up. There's lots of really good advice and just great chat that's going on at the moment. I'll try and get a list together of everybody's help before the end of this to thank them by name. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope that you're excited to submit some strike group ships for me pretty soon. There's going to be a phase 3 as well, where we tie up some of the more common ships that are scattered around the place. At the moment, I don't really see the value in replacing the carrier fleets or the missile fleets, because at the end of the day, you're just going to build a missile carrier or a aircraft carrier. It's not going to be that different, but I think these ships especially are going to be huge game changers in the campaign, and I think the voting for these and the discovering of what you make is going to be really interesting. So once again, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to playing these ships. Let me know if you've got any questions in the description below. Remember to use the link that is linked here, not in the other video. And there is also a link to the Discord below if you want to come and join in. If you are joining the Discord, please just make sure that you're checking out the roles channel to grab the Highfleet role so you can actually see the Highfleet chat, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on in there that I can see a lot of new people are missing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to catching what you design. I'm really excited to see this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.